My name is Terry O'Brien. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Associate Chancellor and Chief of Staff for Chancellor Sam Hawgood. I'm also a UCSF alum and hold an adjunct appointment in the Department of Cellular and Molecular Pharmacology. It's a pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's session, Breaking Bias, Moving Forward in Academic Science, Engineering, and Medicine. Thank you for joining us. Today and this week, we celebrate International Women's History Day, and of course, it's also Women's History Month. These events provide an opportunity to reflect on and recognize the incredible contributions that women have made to our history and that we make every day at work and in our communities. I want to thank the organizers of UCSF's IWD2022 events, including the Committee on the Status of Women, the Office of Diversity and Outreach, Women in Technology, and Women of UCSF Health. IWD is a true collaborative effort of leaders from across all of our mission areas and including faculty, staff, and learners. This session was organized by the UCSF Women Physician Scientists Supergroup. This is an inspiring group of women that I've had the pleasure to get to know over the past 2 years. Special thanks to Dr. Carolyn Shungakoya, Executive Director of WPSS, for her organizing efforts. WPSS formed during the COVID-19 pandemic, growing out of a need for community to support women in this challenging career path. In addition to supporting one another, WPSS, like other groups supporting women's careers at UCSF, is helping us, the leadership, better understand gaps in institutional structures and programs and making suggestions for how we can improve. Their voices, like so many of you here today, have made a real and lasting impact, I believe, on how our institution acknowledges gender bias. For example, at UCSF, we acknowledge the pandemic's disproportionate impact on women and looked for ways, in partnership with many of you, including speakers here today, to develop interventions to help, including childcare resources, COVID relief and faculty resource funds, and other academic and leave policies. There is still more work to do, but we aren't debating whether there is a problem. Today's session brings together a truly impressive group of scientists, physician scientists, and engineers, leaders in their respective fields and leaders in supporting the careers of women at UCSF. I'm excited to hear about their work and for their ideas for how we can do more to break down the gender bias that exists at UCSF and more broadly in the health sciences. I'll now turn things over to Dr. Betsy Crouch, Assistant Professor in Pediatrics, who will moderate the discussion. Dr. Crouch is a neuroscientist, a vascular biologist, and a physician in neonatal perinatal medicine. Her lab, the Neurovascular Development Lab, studies how brain blood vessels grow and interact with each other. Thank you again for joining us today. Betsy?
Thank you, Dr. O'Brien, for your introduction and for your support. I'm honored and thrilled to have the opportunity to moderate this outstanding panel. Before I introduce the panel, I wanted to thank you, the audience, for your interest and your attendance today. We welcome your comments in the chat, and we may have a time for a question or two at the end, so please utilize the chat for your questions as well. Now, let me introduce you to our outstanding panel. Dr. Tejal Desai is a professor in the UCSF Department of Bioengineering and Therapeutic Sciences, whose research spans multiple disciplines, including materials engineering, cell biology, tissue engineering, and pharmacological delivery systems to develop new therapeutic interventions for disease. She is a leader and a visionary, serving as previous chair of her department, founding director of the UCSF UCB Master's Program in Translational Medicine, and inaugural director of the UCSF Engineering and Applied Sciences Initiative, known as HIVE. Relevant to this panel, she received the Chancellor's Award for the Advancement of Women in 2021, and we celebrate her success. Dr. Fanny Elahi is a physician scientist neurologist with expertise in the evaluation and management of patients with cognitive and behavioral disorders due to degenerative brain diseases, such as Alzheimer's disease. She's a new investigator and a rising star in human brain vascular disorders. Dr. Diana Laird is an associate professor in OBGYN who directs the Laboratory of Germline Development, Fitness, and Aging, and was recently selected as an investigator in the CZI BioHub. Her work is motivated by solving infertility, reproductive aging, and understanding the effects of prenatal exposures to endocrine disrupting chemicals and psychosocial stressors. She is involved in the intersection between science and society through the UCSF P30 Earth Center, which is the Environmental Research and Translation for Health, where she is deputy director. She is also working to start a professional group to support and promote academic women in biopharma, which she is calling the Bay Area Biotech Ceiling Breakers. Dr. Melanie Ott is a physician scientist, a senior investigator in the Gladstone Institute of Virology, and a professor of medicine at UCSF. Her lab studies the viruses of today to be prepared for the viruses of tomorrow, currently focusing on HIV-1, the Zika virus, hepatitis B and C, influenza A and B, and I've been fortunate to collaborate with her on a project related to SARS-CoV-2 in the developing human brain. Relevant to this panel, she is also a leader in DEI programs, including the PUMAS, Embark, and Propel programs, all to enhance diversity and representation in science. Dr. Ruchika Pereira is an associate professor in anatomy. Her lab studies how autophagy and the lysosome regulate the response to cellular stress to promote cancer progression. In addition to her award-winning science, she is active with the grad school community, the Immunologists for Gender Equity, and the Immunodiverse Initiative. Unfortunately, Dr. Xianhua Piao and Dr. Allison Williams are not able to join us today at the last minute, but we wanted to acknowledge their contributions to the women scientists at UCSF as well. Dr. Tiffany Scharschmidt is a physician scientist, immunologist, microbiologist, and associate professor of dermatology. The central focus of her laboratory is to investigate the cellular and molecular mechanisms that mediate interactions between bacteria and the developing immune system in skin, with the long-term goal of developing new therapeutic approaches based on this knowledge. She holds leadership positions in ImmunoX and the Benioff Center for Microbiome Medicine, and is a member of the MSDP Council. As it relates to today's discussion, she helped establish the ImmunoX Maternity Support Program and serves as a faculty ally and advisor to several trainee-led ImmunoX DEI and wellness initiatives. She was also a Propel mentor and was recently featured on the Science is Fun podcast. Dr. Doris Wong is a neurosurgeon who specializes in surgery for patients with movement disorders, such as essential tremor, Parkinson's disease, and dystonia. Her research goal is to understand neural network physiology involved with human motor control and movement disorders, and to use novel neuromodulation tools to study and treat brain diseases and injuries. Apart from her science, she is active in the Muriel Steel Society, an inclusive community dedicated to inspiring, supporting, and promoting women surgeons so they can thrive at all stages of their careers. Finally, Dr. Valerie Weaver is the director of the Center for Bioengineering and Tissue Regeneration in the Department of Surgery. Dr. Weaver and her team use an interdisciplinary approach to study the role of cell and tissue level force in breast and pancreatic cancers and in gliomas, and more recently have begun to study how force regulates early development. She also has a distinguished mentoring career with the IRA CDA Scholars Program, amongst others. I'm so inspired just reading these bios, and I am very grateful to be here today. Now let's dive into the questions for the panel. First, across UCSF, we are all part of efforts focused on advancing women and underrepresented groups in science, medicine, and engineering by opening doors, increasing retention, and building community. To the panelists, please tell us about some of the efforts you've been a part of and where we still need to make the most progress going forward. Tiffany, do you mind getting us started?
Yes, happy to, Betsy. Thanks so much. And it's an honor to be on this panel, and thanks to the organizers of this great discussion. To that question, I think I'd point to just when I was starting out as faculty and was approached by some graduate students, female graduate students in the immunology program, to see if I could be their faculty advisor on a new group that they were building to represent women in immunology. And my first sort of thought internally, which I didn't vocalize, was me. I just was appointed, what is going on here? But what I realized is when I sort of walked into my first faculty meeting, while there was some, very, very established women in the room, some of them, on this panel today, we were definitely underrepresented in that room in terms of senior faculty that were within the program. And I think them reaching out to me was an indication of sort of wanting more of these sort of visible mentors at different stages of their careers that they could connect with. That initial conversation sort of came back to me a few years later when I was on the ImmunoX steering committee. This group has now, grown into what is known as IG Equity, a really trainee-led organization that is supported by faculty mentors and allies like myself and others on this panel, as we heard in Rashika, and really trying to build a community for the trainees, but also interconnectivity with those faculty and sort of highlighting the women in our community already, but trying to find ways to, allow for greater ease and sort of peer and near peer mentorship and build that community around it. I think that, along with other DEI initiatives that I've been able to sort of engage with that are at the trainee level, Immunodiverse, the Mental Health Coalition, are really serving not only female, trainees and young scientists, but those who identify as underrepresented minorities, and sort of the dual cost, obviously, that's associated with sort of both gender minority and racial or ethnic minority status. And those are wonderful to see within individual programs, but I think there's more room to sort of fuel those at the community level across UCSF and see those come together in bigger efforts. I'd add on just to say that another sort of, key transition point I know for myself, sort of personally, that often will intersect at a challenging point for females in science and physician scientists, is sort of for those of us who do want to build a family, sort of having those childbearing years often coincide with major transitions. For me, a lot of it during my postdoc or early faculty years. I was in a training department where we had some technician support, but that's not often the case and not something that can be funded. And so that was something that, as I again joined the leadership committee of ImmunoX, was happy to see funds actually specifically earmarked for. And I was really just, along with some other female faculty, Anita Sill and others, just helping to actualize really that program, which has been great in trying to fund technician support for at least 5 to 6 either students or postdocs in the community to kind of help ease again what can be a challenging time. So I want to yield the platform to, I know, so many other contributions here, but those are some things I think that have been exciting to be a part of, but obviously just a seed in what can be done.
Thanks so much, Tiffany. Diana, I know you've also have made a lot of contributions in this area.
Sure, and thanks again to Betsy and Carolyn for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's just really great, and I am looking forward to having a discussion and to hearing what the other panelists say. So I've been trying to build a community of academic women around biopharma, and this is really motivated by about not quite a year ago, reading a report that came out from MIT by Nancy Hopkins and Sanjay Bhatia and Susan Hockfield. And Nancy Hopkins has been one of my heroes for a long time, because she was she was a woman who was in academics when things were actually really difficult, and she was the one who just got out the measuring tape and pointed out the problem that women at MIT had less lab space, less office space than their male peers. And so kind of this was her part 2 of pointing out that actually the discrepancy between women who are funding biopharma companies and their male counterparts is even more stark. And the statistics are grim. It's something like 2% of biopharma founders are women. And people of color are really underrepresented. People of non-binary gender are also like starkly underrepresented in this field. And it's kind of a chicken and egg problem that we don't see other women who are doing it. So we don't have peers. We don't really have a picture of what this looks like. And because of this, we kind of don't have access. We're not invited to be on scientific advisory boards or just on boards of advisors. And that really excludes a lot of brain power and a lot of creativity. And it also really compounds the discrepancy in salary between men and women, because these things are contributing to salary. So it was really just like feeling angry about that late one night and firing off an email to a lot of my my peers and colleagues who I really respect and admire, saying, you know, I'm really angry about this and I don't really know what to do about it. But it was just sort of a late night rant. And by the time I got up the next morning, like my email box was overflowing by all the responses. And I was really taken aback by the passion that I would, and just the big feelings that were coming back to me about this, and sort of felt a responsibility that from something that I'd started, that I need to kind of like move this forward a bit. And so surveying the group on what do people need and what do they want, I think that we've sort of formed a grassroots activist group of academic women at, we've got people from Berkeley and Stanford as well, and calling it Biotech Ceiling Breakers. And so I want to just wrap up, but just say that you can email me if you're interested, or if your friends are interested, and it's really a peer network and information and support group.
Maybe I can add on to that, just because I really applaud, well, all of you who are amazing women here. But and just hearing what Diana said in terms of representation, I think it starts from very early on, where it's known in the literature that ideas that come from women and those from underrepresented backgrounds are often valued or devalued in the marketplace. And so, I think even when we talk about, the types of science to profile and the types of advances to look at in terms of our development office or our IP and Office of Technology Management, there are subtle messages being sent that women perhaps are not ready for this. And so I think, really starting to look internally about what are those messages that we send, who are the entrepreneurs or innovators that are highlighted even on our own websites, I think will be really a first step to at least starting to look and address the problem. Because as we begin our careers here, you sort of, many of us have gone through this path realizing and thinking that we're alone. And if we can sort of connect the dots and see that there is a community, that could be really valuable. But absolutely, I'm so impressed by those that are here who have really tried to mobilize the community and bring us together.
So I will pick up on what Tejal had to say. I've been around maybe not quite as long as Tejal at UCSF, but long enough, and I'm very active in the national, international communities. And what I would say, I'm very focused on moving things forward. And I would say, as a community, I've been involved in a lot of organizing meetings. And I would say when you have a woman on the meeting organizing committee, or when you're organizing it, you have a good opportunity to make sure that you have representation, both with gender and racial backgrounds. I think the same thing goes for program projects and grants that you're putting together, any committees that you're working on. And I would also say it would be really great as a community to get together and begin to highlight individuals for awards, because I sit on a lot of award committees and I'm constantly putting people up, but it takes a lot of work. And if you have a group that actually can come up with like dossiers and bios of people, then you can put people up. And Diana, you talked about the issue where women are not always recognized. And part of the recognition is guys are really good at building community and putting each other up for awards. Some of the awards I see people put up for, I look at it and I go, oh my gosh, I wouldn't even have ever thought that I would even be close to there. And these guys continue doing that. It's not to get upset at them. It's to say, well, what can we do? So how can we move it forward? Every one of us does a lot of mentoring, through, all the way down from the student level through, faculty level, your fellows, at UCSF and around the world. I'm involved in a lot. So there's quite a lot of need, but I think, it's reaching down and reaching up, because I would say some of the senior women need support as well, because, part of the challenge is it's like there's a dike and it's leaking and you're trying to figure out where do you put your finger, where do you prioritize your energy and your effort, and how do you actually make things better. So as a community, I think it would be really good to pull together, and I would be all for putting together a committee that would be like an awards committee. I mean, all these other institutions, they're constantly bothering me for letters for people from their institution because they put them up. And I'm thinking, we should have this here. Now, of course, individual, chairs could do that, but why not take the ball and run it forward and do it ourselves? So that's a positive step that we can do. And women tend to not always put themselves forward. They don't always think we're good enough. I would say it's good for me to say to somebody else, you rock, I'll put you forward. We could do that, but you need the help to do that. So I will defer now to the next person.
I can jump in. I might be the longest serving on the panel. I'm here 20 years. I recently had my 20th anniversary, which is shocking. I'm at Gladstone. I can tell you when I started 20 years ago, there was no women faculty. I started as a visiting scientist at Gladstone. There was no women faculty at Gladstone. And now we have 11 women faculty after 20 years, and this is about a third of our faculty currently. So there's definitely, and it has taken a lot of work. It has taken a lot of continuous effort and focus in many areas, and starting from having childcare at retreats, to putting women into rotating women into executive committee meetings, to many things that really continuously keep it in the forefront that yes, we have, we're paying attention to have 50% of women speakers. I know everybody is trying to do this now, but the problem is it is a continuous effort, and unfortunately never reaches a level where you can say, okay, now we're here, nothing has to be done, because unfortunately psychology is against us, and bias is still there. And I think this is just, I think there's a lot of effort and a lot of progress, but I think my message is that it takes continuous effort to maintain the level and to continuously improve it. I would say, I would also echo that I think major pushes have to be done in the senior level. Because as we know, we're sort of having equal representation in postdocs, graduate students, then it's, drops down with faculty, but it really drops down when it comes to the leadership positions. And I think now we have at Gladstone 2 directors, Katie Pollard and myself, which changes the dynamic in the executive team, the discussions. And as I said, we also have a rotating woman, senior woman that comes in to sort of really echo what women voices have to say and to contribute, instead of having men just ignore it, basically. And I think this is something that I think we continue to focus on. I mean, we focus on many areas, but I think that's something that needs to be done. Awards, I think, is an excellent idea. I think endowed chairs is also an important thing to revisit and to look at, because I think they are not equally distributed, and they should. So I think, and they give enormous visibility and freedom in terms of money to spend. And so I think my last point is that I think childcare remains an issue that is really something that is important for everybody, from grad students to faculty. And I think here, I think UCSF has really done a lot to increase the childcare places, but I think the cost is still incredibly high. And I think we have to continuously work to, especially to, enhance our, junior, people, junior faculty or mid-range faculty or the postdocs, really in that area where we have to support women. And it's not only women. I think as the pandemic has shown, I think childcare is something that bears mostly on women, but also on men. And I think this is something where we have to, I think, still continue to make huge progress in terms of making it accessible to everybody. So with this, I hand it over to the next one.
I think I'll wrap up this discussion for right now, but thank you so much, everyone, for your thoughts on advancing women in a variety of different contexts, which I think all have unique challenges, but also unique opportunities. I also wanted to acknowledge, I got to have a talk one time with Dr. Carla Pugh. She's a professor of surgery at Stanford, and she has an educational PhD because she was very interested in how surgeons learn tactile stimuli in terms of how that moderates their ability to tell about clinical changes in the patients. And she gave a fascinating TED Talk, and I got to talk to her afterwards. And she was just reminiscing on her time as a woman in science and medicine and saying, you know, to the extent that you're able to stay in this, we move the needle forward by pushing one another. And I thought, that's so inspiring. So I'm thankful to all of your efforts to continue to do that. Moving into a different topic, on this panel, we're all at the different career stages, and our audience members also come with different levels of experience. If you think back to your last career transition, what made you most successful in your previous stage, and or what were the most rewarding aspects of your career at that stage?
I can try to take a stab at this question. Again, thank you everybody for inviting me and for being a part of this. So yeah, my background is, slightly unique in that, I'm a surgeon scientist. And when I was going through medical school at UCSF, there just weren't a lot of female neurosurgeon scientists. And, the role models I had were all male. So when I chose my field and did my residency training here at UCSF, I had great mentors to look up to. And I think one thing that helped me through this is just that, they were huge advocates for me and, never made me feel different because of my gender. And I think that was instrumental for me to just get through residency and loving it. And then I think the transition from fellowship to junior faculty here, again, it's really, really dependent and critical to have just amazing mentors here to support you. My mentor really advocated for me for my position here as to become faculty. He gave me, besides giving me tons of great research experience during my fellowship training, also supplied me patients that I can, get preliminary data for to start applying for grants. And I think having an advocate, it was just essential for where I am today. And having an ally, I think a champion for yourself.
I'm going to add to that. I really liked what Doris said. I think what it has been critical at each stage. So I'm a physician scientist, so MD, PhD, then postdoc / clinical fellowship, and then faculty. So lots of different transitions. It's really a potential until it becomes an actual. And at that stage where you need people to see what you can do, you haven't done it, you're trained to do it, but you haven't had time to deliver. You need people to say, she's amazing. Let's give her the space. Let's give her the benches. Let's give her the patients. Let's give her the funds. Let's support her life with childcare or whatever is possible so that we get her there. And I think that element, unfortunately, because there aren't structural systems in place, is luck. And I think that's the component of luck. You need creativity, you need perseverance, you need potential, but you need to be in the right place in the right time. And I think the microenvironment is everything. So if you come up for faculty transition at a time where your division leadership or your departmental chair doesn't believe in you for, whatever reason, then you're not going to get the right package. You're not going to get the right support. And it's basically potential wasted. So I think you're at your most vulnerable at those transition stages. As I've transitioned and I think about my next transition, I feel the ceilings, and I see the ceilings at the leadership position. And as I hear all of you speak, I think that may be one of the hardest ceilings to break, because it is full potential, right? It's not until you're leading at some sort of scale that you've shown that you can lead. So people have to have seen leaders that are like you. You know, you need some sort of mold that you're sort of filling that people are comfortable with. And maybe that's a huge barrier to break. And so, you know, leading your lab, but then leading initiatives at scale, I think is really hard for women. And I find myself having conversations about, well, what is it that I can't do for this and that position, for instance, that I think remains to be a challenge.
Maybe I'll pick up from what you had to say there, Fanny. I would say, I mean, it's been a while, but for me, part of my motivation to come to UCSF from UPenn was that there were strong female leaders. And now I think we can do better, but it's actually, UCSF is pretty good in terms of, at least even when I came, which was like 15 years ago. But, you know, having leaders like Tejal, and there was, there was Sarah was around, there were, my chair of surgery, Nancy Asher was the chair at that time. And then we had Zena Word was still around. That played a huge role in my decision to come here. And these women were, their visibility and their strength was what really helped me. And I would say, the one lesson I have learned is that I always think of myself as being invisible, but you're not, so everything you do, all of a sudden you realize that you really do have an impact. So if you stand up and you lead, people watch you and they look at you and they follow you, or they follow your example because they know it's doable. So I would say, don't underestimate your visibility. Every single one of us here, you are then paying it forward, and you're actually helping the next generations and all these other women and men, because they can see how you lead your group is a kind of microcosm of how you want the world to be. So don't underestimate that. But I think, mentorship, but also just example is so important, absolutely important, which is why I think it's important to build each other up and increase our visibility. I think visibility is really key here on all different fronts, right? So I'll step on.
I can add quickly to that. So I would say the last transition I went through was a big one for me, is moving from an assistant professor to a tenured associate professor, which is always that big challenge when you first start. I think that, I wouldn't have been able to do it without a lot of, incredible support from women on this panel, Val, for example, as well as the faculty within my department and within UCSF. And as part of that, there are tangible things that you have to achieve, that there are just deliverables that you have to do. But there are all these other things that, you don't, as Fanny really nicely said, you don't realize what your full potential is unless someone gives you the chance to actually do it. And at the moment when, I've served on several committees, one example being the Parnassus Revitalization Program. And, as part of that, I was, when that committee first started, I was an assistant professor. I'd only been here for a few years, and I was asking myself, why am I here? There's all these people with so much experience and I don't know anything. And I was very lucky to have people like Tamara Alliston on that committee that said, we need younger voices on this committee, because presumably we would be the ones that stay here for decades, right? And so our opinions on what happens to our campus and what we should be thinking about for the future is really important. And she and several others always sort of pushed me to do things, to take on, roles that I was not quite, perhaps in my mind, not quite ready for, but they saw the potential well before I did myself. And I think having experienced that, I then take that into how I also train my trainees. There are a lot of, I think, trainees on the call today. And, you might feel like sometimes we push you to do something a little bit outside the box that you might feel you're not ready for, but perhaps, having a little bit of faith in how we see you, and that we see the potential in what you're able to do, similar to how senior faculty see the potential in what I'm able to do. I think when you get those opportunities, don't be afraid to run with them. I think those are really great ways to learn all the things that you can do. And certainly when those opportunities come around, you should just grab them, and go with it. So, yeah.
May I just add one thing? I've already spoken, but Rishika, when you say feeling not ready for that, I think that's so key. The discomfort is where growth comes. So those are, when I look back, it's when I felt the least ready, but I went for it with all the internal fear and sort of masking it, that I had that exponential growth. And perhaps that's when you need other people to exactly say that, of course you can do it, that, we're doing it and we're going to do this together and you're awesome. And all these things, those sort of emotions in the micro environment is so critical.
Yeah. I think we spend a lot of time worrying about expectations, our own and those of others, of being afraid of perhaps making mistakes, big or small. And sometimes we just have to sort of put that aside and say, I'm just going to try it. I'm just going to do it. And if I do make a mistake, it's okay. That's a learning experience. So I think, those are big hurdles sometimes, not insurmountable, but hurdles nevertheless. And so having good support and people telling you, no, I have faith in you. I think you can do this. And, if it doesn't work out perfectly, that's okay.
I'm really enjoying how, hearing from all of you women at different stages, how like the women at more senior, how you're highlighting, we need more women at senior positions, but that also, brings up the idea that we need more women at junior faculty and we need more women, at every stage. And so I think it's been really great to highlight the success and the strengths. And at the same time, I'd like to pivot our discussion a little bit to where we really need to improve. What are our biggest challenges, I think, in women in all of our particular fields at this moment?
Maybe I can start. I would say the biggest challenge is still the confidence factor. I think that's sort of echoing everything that we already said. And but I would say this is something that we have to work on and that we have to work on as a group. I still remember when I started out, 20 years ago. I said it now many times, but the point is that initially I thought this is not my problem. Other women have problem with being a woman, but it's not my problem. Realizing that it's a problem for all of us, because there is a bias, I think was really important for me and catapulted my whole thinking about this forward. So I think keeping this in mind. The second thing I thought which was important was to really not be shy to ask for advice from other women, and that's the mentoring aspect. I think we need to mentor our young female and male trainees, but to be confident in that and knowledgeable and visible. But also we need to not shy away from really asking advice from more senior women. And often we think, oh, who am I that woman would pick up the phone and talk to me? Guess what? They will. In 99% of the cases, they will. And so I have learned this myself. I had incredible women mentors. They have been incredibly important. And I think just the feeling of being heard and sharing these experiences that are not really shareable with sometimes with men, I think is very powerful, and I think can lead to solutions, confidence, and progress in the future.
I'm just going to make one quick comment here. Time. If you talk about what is the biggest challenge, time, and oftentimes forgetting to prioritize our own self-care and our own time so that we end up by taking care of everybody else around us. So one of the exercises I do with some of the women I mentor is to do the 10 pots and the X number of pots and all the little P's, and pay the personal pot first. So I would like to hear what people have to say, because that, I would say, is a big challenge, and it becomes even more as you move up and more things are required of you, and more your effort is dispersed all over the place. How do you prioritize time? And of course, Melanie, you get to also, as a senior woman, you also get to be supported. Oftentimes people assume that as you move up the ladder that you've got it all figured out, and half the time all of us feel imposter syndrome big time. you're up there and people are asking you and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I'm leading them. What if I'm leading them the wrong way? It's a terrible feeling, but you just charge forward. So I would love to hear what my colleagues on the panel have to say about time.
I'll follow up on both what Valerie said and Melanie. I mean, I guess first to the point of sort of connectivity, Melanie. I mean, I think one silver lining for the pandemic for me actually was when sort of Slack groups grew up that I wasn't a part of, that included senior women, that included this women's physicians, scientist super group. And I had this immediate connectivity that actually wasn't there before the pandemic, just because of time and space and the breadth of the UCSF campus and all these departments. And so, I mean, that was a silver lining, but we were talking about it. I learned so much even by passively participating in some of those conversations and sometimes contributing more actively in terms of what people were thinking and what they learned and kind of seen inside these women leaders' heads about the shared experience and what that's like. To the point of time, I think, Fanny was just saying, you got to be ready to take those opportunities, and there's great opportunities for oneself, but to the point Valerie just made as well, you do get drawn on a lot to participate in a lot of things, maybe not nearly as strongly as sort of racial or ethnic minority taxes, but still, I think I was very surprised by, how many search committees I got pulled on to, quickly after becoming a faculty at this or that level. And, and that's continued. Those have been wonderful experiences, but trying to figure out exactly what to prioritize time-wise that is, in your career, in your personal life, obviously contributing to the community and doing those things. But it's a lot of decisions. And that's another place where I think as with near peer women mentors and other things, you can sort of search through those things to figure out what to prioritize. But I don't think I've answered your time question, Valerie, because it's a constant conundrum, but an important problem to think through all the time.
Maybe I'll add a few thoughts. I really also echo that, women, both senior and actually all career women, can open up doors and really be sponsors to each other. But I also think we need to challenge the entire community to do the same. In engineering, even at the undergraduate level, there's, less than 25% are women. And so that only sort of narrows as you go up. And, at the full professor level, it's around 10%. And so if I or others at my, are only to rely on the other women around us, it would be really difficult, and it is difficult to really think about changing the culture. And so I guess I would say how, the big challenge is how can we really mobilize a culture shift so that it doesn't rely on all of us, which then goes back to time, because we don't have the time to do it all. And it's not, it doesn't position us for that well-being that we really need to do for ourselves and our family.
I want to just add something to all these really fantastic comments. How we feel goes a long way. I think that how I feel makes my time triple, quadruple versus shrink. And then that goes back to how much support we're getting from 3, 4 people or 10 or 20 people. It's not so much the number, it's how genuine and how strong the support actually is around us. And I had a very interesting conversation with a mentor, and she asked point blank, who do you want to collaborate with? And I realized the shortest answer was women. And then she was like, is it women because they're women? And we thought together, basically, what are the characteristics of collaborators that I work with really nicely and become productive. And I find it in men. And so I think it's basically what are the features of allies that we need in the community that will propel women forward professionally. It's going to be men and women, but there are certain characteristics that I think are really helpful. And that's basically being forward thinking, change oriented, and thinking outside of the box. Because to fix this problem at so many different levels, and so in engineering, starting with 20%, 25%, and then shrinking that down, these are really big problems. And so it requires out of the box solutions.
Perhaps, so I think, Val, your point about time is really an excellent one. And I think going back again to sort of all of us at different stages of our career, but also people on the call who are perhaps graduate students, postdocs, technicians, there's a way in which you can, at every level, decide what it is you're really passionate about doing. Of course, you know, we're passionate about science. That's what bridges us all together, ties us all together. But there'll be other things that we're really passionate about. You've heard about, you know, Tiffany's initiatives, Diana's initiatives. You know, something that was really important for me when I first started was teaching. I love to teach. I think that's at every level, at graduate level, for medical students. I've even taught at high schools. And I think going back to sort of this idea of what are you passionate about? What do you enjoy doing? What makes you happy, as Fanny said? And how can you also start to encourage sort of at the earliest stage, if what you could do, what you're doing also helps to do something in addition, not just to teach a topic, but perhaps to say, motivate or inspire a junior person, a young person to do what you're doing one day. I think that's an added bonus. So partly managing time is also about doing things that make you really happy, that are rewarding for you, that that sometimes have dual or triple purposes. So that's how I look at it at time as well.
Maybe just a quick add-on to the time question, which is a very important one. I think when you make time also for strategy. So often we work on the paper, we work on the next talk. Sorry, my dog is a little loud in the background here, but we work on the kids, we work on you know, family. But I think sometimes we need to step back and we have to make dedicated time to strategy in the way, like, where do I want to be positioned? Where do I want to position my lab? Where do I want to be? And I think stepping back and looking at this, I think helps to then also, you know, go into all the other issues with visibility, confidence, awards, whatever. But for me, this was a major step when I started to make dedicated time to think about strategy instead of just the next paper.
I was thinking about one of the aspects of time for me has been as a new investigator, a new PI, and also a physician scientist, has been when Dr. Carolyn Sangoya started her Women's Physician Scientist Supergroup. I'm an extrovert also, and I find it really fun to brainstorm with her and to think about ways to, you know, promote women physician scientists and to solve some of our unique problems. So I think one of the ways that I deal with time is that I find it really fun to work with other smart women who are trying to solve problems. So I find that both like satisfying to my soul and also energizing. So I just wanted to call out the WPSS group started by Carolyn also. This has gone by so quickly, and so we're on to our last topic. Melanie, did you have anything pressing you wanted to add?
Oh, I mistook the button. I wanted to applaud, but there's no applaud button here. Sorry.
Yes, it does deserve. There's so many answers here that deserve much applause. We'll save it for the end. Our final question then, to close. For all of the women on this panel, what motivates you? And Rushika spoke to this a little bit that I enjoyed. What motivates you in mentoring and encouraging other women and underrepresented groups in science?
I'd like to answer that. It's just this wonderful dynamic. You create a community. And when you watch the people that you mentor do well, and I mean, this doesn't have to even be at your own institution. It's wherever, you know, wherever you motivate and mentor and interact with people. And graduating, you know, hitting my first student, I hadn't really appreciated what a thrill I had. I mean, I love the science. I love doing the work. I love the science, but I was thrilled. I'm still in this person's life. And all of the trainees I've had, male and female, you know, and all the people I've mentored over the years, it's just absolutely wonderful to build that community. And it gives back in a way that I'd never in a million years expected, but I absolutely love. And it's what keeps me, you know, keeps me motivated. The science is fun, but the mentoring is absolutely brilliant. I love doing that. I find it rewarding. There's times when I want to pull my hair out, to admit. But overall, I love it. I think it's wonderful, and it definitely is something that I feel is very fulfilling. So for me, mentoring and the community that you build of colleagues, but also of all your trainees that move on. They get their own group and then they come to the meetings with their F1s and their F2s, as we call them, from science talk. It's wonderful. So I think it's a celebration. I absolutely love it. And I wouldn't, this is the best part about academic science.
Betsy, I really liked your phrase before when you said satisfying to the soul. That really resonated with me. I think that's partly why we do what we do. There's satisfaction to our soul, right? And mentoring is such a big part of that, I think. There's nothing better than seeing sort of a trainee who starts in your lab, with all their worries and concerns and excitement and motivation, to then watch them blossom into something that's truly extraordinary by the time they leave you. And we stay behind always, and we see our trainees come and leave us, but they leave us as just sort of extraordinary human beings. I mean, they were already, but they blossom into something really quite beautiful. So I think that's something that just always makes me feel so good and so happy, and is satisfying to the soul. So,
for me, I was one of those who was going to leave the field at a very early age, and had a lot of self-doubt and felt like I was not in the right place. And so, I've really been always guided by not wanting anyone to feel that, and making sure that I could be that person who at least could understand and appreciate what it meant to be feeling that way and not feeling like you could be a scientist or an engineer. And that, I think, sort of has always aligned with what I've been trying to do. And, it goes hand in hand with mentoring, but it is, really not wanting others to feel what I felt at that moment in my life.
That echoes with me too, Joel, because I started out as a pure MD, always wanting to do science in Germany. There was no MD PhD program at the time, and then went to do a postdoc as an MD, which was very hard, and so I had to work double hard to get up to the level that was required, and then eventually did a PhD after. But that experience of wanting to do something and then finally, getting the chance to do something was really incredibly important for me. And it drives also my conviction that everybody, has talents that can be promoted and can be brought, out to the light. And so I think I'm really always looking in my trainees. I'm genuinely interested to find out who they are and what makes them tick and what makes them work and where they have hesitations. And I think, but I think my general predisposition is that everything is possible, and people with very little, knowledge at the beginning can become superstars if they have the right support, and I think that's what is sort of a personal experience that also drives my mentorship. And I think, as Betsy said at the beginning, I started a lot of diversity efforts with the high school students in our neighborhood when Gladstone moved to Mission Bay, and Mission Bay was still pretty barren and dangerous at times because nobody was around. I think we really reached out to the neighboring schools and tried to share our passion for science with kids who are actually not seeing any opportunities here in San Francisco and cannot wait to get out of here. Well, I'm coming from Germany because I think that here the opportunities are really the best. And so we started this very early. And again, as a woman, many people told me not to do this because that would put me into sort of the corner of the people who don't do science, but do sort of outreach and mentoring. But I think this has also changed. I have always followed my heart. And I think we have built incredible programs, including the PUMAS program, that is a undergraduate program where people who transition from a city college to a 4-year UC position, and I think we're giving them the chance to do an internship at that time, and we provide lifelong mentoring and networking opportunities. And I think that's to boost their confidence and making them being part of the system. And I think that works. And so I think, yes, I think we have to always follow our heart and do the right thing. And I think mentoring is a vital part of what we do.
Oh, there are hands that are, no, I shouldn't talk to you guys.
I know we're running short on time, but I could go another hour. Doris and Diana and Tiffany, do you want to just give a few sentences about your motivations?
Sure, absolutely. I think, inspiring the next generation is what motivates me. As I mentioned, when I entered this field, I had no female neurosurgeon scientist role models. And I hope that just by me being here, sticking to it, running a lab, trying to get good science done will inspire the next generation. And sure enough, for a span of almost 10 years, we hardly had even any female residents in neurosurgery here. Now we have 4. And seeing one of my neurosurgery mentees win various research award for the work she has done, there's nothing more satisfying. So I think, just as everybody said, by being here and by being visible, I think makes a huge impact for the next generation.
I'll also make a brief comment that I think there's so many messages about what being professional is about, that it's somehow about a separation between your professional being and your personal life. And I think that one thing that is so gratifying to me, and I've heard so many of you point out to it, is that we can share not only the process of doing science, but in mentoring, the process of helping somebody else to learn to become a scientist and to be constantly redefining what that means. To understand why people are coming to science, what brings them here, what motivates them, to understand and work through together the problems of being a parent and being a scientist at the same time, and becoming like true friends on multiple levels with my colleagues and trainees and people in the field. So I really, all of this, it's an intensely gratifying and it's intense. I think we have to acknowledge that, but it's a great career.
We'll finish, and I could second everything that's been said on this topic. I guess I would just add that, yes, while trying to sort of, share with my trainees what I've learned, I think what's been so energizing for me is just how much they bring to it, how much they teach me. I mean, as I mentioned, most of the initiatives I've been privileged to be a part of are really led by and started by trainees, and my role is really sort of an ally and supervisor in that respect. But they bring a really fresh and energized perspective, and maybe see things in new ways that we don't, even that we've been in this institution for so long. So I think they are very instrumental part of the change we're trying to instrument. And so I think that's the other great sort of feed forward aspect of this close mentorship.
Yes, I think very much. I'm so inspired by the young people in my lab, and I wanted to acknowledge all of the trainees who joined us today and who continue to do the hard work with us, in our labs and in the hospital. And I also just wanted to thank all of you, our panelists, for sharing your experience and your wisdom with us. I want to thank the audience for your attention. I want to thank Mercedes Paredes and Carolyn Sangoya, who were my co-planners in this awesome panel. And finally, please remember to click the link, fill out the survey, or scan the QR code. And let's continue to celebrate our successes as women in science, and to push one another to excel both scientifically and to #break the bias in our communities. Thank you.